Recording by Michael Fossio. A Book of Fairy Tales by Sabine Baring Gould. Tom Thumb. In the days of King Arthur there lived a ploughman and his wife, who wished greatly to have a son. So the man went to Merlin the enchanter and told him that he and his wife had been married for 20 years and had no children, and that they longed to have a little son, even if he were no bigger than his thumb. "Go home and you will find that you have one," said the enchanter. And when the man returned to his house he found his wife nursing a tiny, tiny baby, who grew to be the size of the ploughman's thumb, but never grew much bigger. The fairy queen Vivienne was invited to the christening, and named him Tom Thumb. An oak leaf hat he had for crown, his shirt of web by spiders spun, with jacket wove of thistle down, his breeches were of feathers done. His stockings of apple rind they tie with eyelash from his mother's eye. His shoes were made of mouse's skin, turned with a downy hair within. Tom was a healthy and happy baby. His parents were very fond of him. Although he was so small, yet their love for him was very great. They used to hold him on their palms till he was old enough to toddle, and then they placed him on the table. They were afraid to let him run on the floor lest he should be trodden on. He was mischievous for all his small size, and as he grew to be a boy of 12 he was always at some prank or other. When Tom was old enough to play with the other boys, he delighted to do so, but then he was ever at some mad prank or other. At that time boys were wont to play with cherry stones instead of marbles, and when Tom had lost all his own cherry stones, he used to creep into the bags of his playfellows, fill his pockets, and crawl out again without their noticing what he was about, and join in the game once more. One day, however, as he was issuing from a bag of cherry stones, where he had been stealing as usual, the boy whose bag he had entered chanced to see him. "Ho, ho!" exclaimed the lad. "So, Tom Thumb, then you are at your usual pranks. Now I have caught you stealing my cherry stones. I have long suspected you. As I have got you, I shall punish you." Then he drew the string of the bag tight round Tom's neck, and shook the bag well, so that the cherry stones rattled against and bruised Tom's little body and thighs and legs. He screamed for pain, and begged to be released, and promised that he never would steal again. One day that he had been at his pranks he was shut up in a pin box. This hurt him greatly, and next day he resolved to revenge himself. He took a number of glasses and hung them on a sunbeam. The other boys tried to do the same, but failed, and broke all the glasses, and were severely whipped for having done this. One day, while his mother was making a batter pudding, Tom stood on the edge of the bowl holding a candle in one hand, so that he might see that the pudding was properly made. But as he tried to balance himself on one toe, when his mother's back was turned, he slipped and went head foremost into the pudding. His mother did not know this, and continued stirring the pudding, and put it and him into the pot. But Tom no sooner felt the hot water than he danced like one mad, and his mother was so frightened to see the pudding bouncing about that she thought it was bewitched, and she hastily gave it to a tinker who was passing the door. The tinker was delighted with his present, but as he was getting over a stile, Tom shouted out from the middle of the pudding, "Hallo, Pickens!" and this so terrified the tinker that he flung away the pudding in the field, and it broke to pieces, and Tom escaped. Tom then cleaned himself of the flour that stuck to him, and walked home to his mother, who had been in great distress because she could not find him. She gave him a lecture not to be rash and to get where he would be in mischief, and kissed him, and was very rejoiced to have him again. One day he climbed up the side of the cream pan and tumbled in, and would have been drowned had not his screams brought his mother to his aid. Another time he was lost, and after seeking for him everywhere, the poor woman saw his head popping out of the salt box which hung against the wall, and he came out as if covered over with hoar frost. When his mother went into the fields to milk the cow, she was wont to tie him to a thistle lest he should run away and get into mischief. If a bee came that way, then Tom, who was armed with a needle, fought it and carried off its honey. When a butterfly came that way, If Tom had not been tied to the thistle, he would certainly have jumped on its back and tried, if he could, to be carried away a sail in the air. One day a field mouse came and looked at him. Tom was afraid of the mouse, so he called to his mother, who came up, and the mouse started away. One day, while Tom was tied to the thistle, the cow, seeing his oak leaf cap, took poor Tom and the thistle at one mouthful. But, being missed, his mother went calling him everywhere. "Where art thou, Tom? Where art thou, Tom?" Quoth he, "Here, mother, here. Within the red cow's mouth am I, full nearly swallowed up," which made his mother weep and sigh that thus the cow should sup. Tom kicked and scratched till the cow dropped him from her mouth. His mother caught him in her apron as he was falling, or he would have been greatly hurt. One day Tom went with his father into the fields a ploughing, and the father made him a whip of barley straw wherewith to drive the oxen, but Tom's foot slipped, and he fell into the furrow without the father observing it. A crow flying by saw the barley straw, stooped, and carried Tom off to the top of a giant's castle. The giant took Tom in the palm of his hand and laughed much to see how small he was. Tom had his little sword of a needle at his side, and he pricked the giant with it, and he shook his hand, and Tom gave a jump, and went out at the window and fell into the sea, where a fish swallowed him. The fish was soon after caught, and brought to the castle of King Arthur. His steward bought it, and ordered the cook to boil it for dinner. When the cook was opening the fish, to his great astonishment out jumped Tom, quite delighted to be free again. He was taken before the king, who made Tom his dwarf, and he soon became a great favourite at court, where he delighted every one by his gambols. Long time he lived in jollity, beloved of the court, and none like Tom was so esteemed among the better sort. The Queen Guinevere was especially delighted with the little man, and made him dance a galliard on her left hand. His performance was so satisfactory that King Arthur gave him a ring which he wore about his waist as a girdle. When he was out with the king, if rain came on he would creep up the sleeve of Arthur and lie there till the shower was over. One day Tom, who could not forget his poor father and mother, asked King Arthur to grant him leave to go and visit them. The king readily agreed, and taking him into his treasury, told him to carry away with him as much money as he could for his poor parents. This made him caper for joy. He found that the only coin he could carry was a threepenny piece. And so away goes lusty Tom, with threepence at his back, a heavy burden which did make his very bones to crack. Tom remained 3 days with the old couple, and feasted on a hazelnut so extravagantly that he grew ill. King Arthur became impatient to have his dwarf back again, so his mother took a sort of tube, through which people blew darts at birds to kill them, and she put Tom in and blew through it, and blew him back to court. He was received by the king with every token of affection and delight, and tournaments were proclaimed in his honour. Thus he at tilt and tournament was entertained so, that all the rest of Arthur's knights did him much pleasure show. As Tom's clothes had suffered much in the batter pudding and in the furrow, and in the inside of the fish, the king ordered him a new suit of clothes, and gave him a mouse to ride. Of butterflies' wings his shirt was made, his boots of chicken's hide, and by a nimble fairy blade, well learned in the tailoring trade, his clothing was supplied. A needle dangled by his side, a dapper mouse he used to ride. Thus strutted Tom in stately pride. Tom used to go out hunting on his mouse with the king and the knights. Arthur also ordered a little chair to be made, in order that Tom might sit on his table, and he gave him as well a carriage drawn by 6 white mice. At last the Queen got jealous of Tom, because the king made so much of him, and she determined to be rid of him, and when the king was away she had him shut up in prison in a mouse trap. But he managed to squeeze himself between the bars, and, seeing a lame butterfly, he climbed on its back, and the butterfly carried him away. However, in passing over the sea, he became giddy and fell off, when he was again swallowed by a fish, which was caught, and set out for sale in the town of Rye, where a steward haggled for it with the fisherman who had caught it. Amongst the rest a steward came, who would the salmon buy, and other fish that he did name, but he would not comply. The steward said, "You are so stout, if so I'll not buy any." So then out called Tom Thumb aloud, "Sir, give another penny." At this they all began to start, to hear the sudden joke, nay, some were frightened to the heart, they thought the dead fish spoke. The steward made no more ado, but bid a penny more, "Because," he said, "I never knew a fish to speak before." When the fish was opened, out came Tom again, and he remained in the kitchen at Rye, and was a great object of diversion to the servants. One day he was put in the window, when a great spider observed him and came down to him. Tom made a gallant fight, yet the spider's poisonous breath at last overcame him. He fell dead on the ground where he stood, and the spider sucked every drop of his blood. When the tidings came to King Arthur, he was very sorry, and went into mourning, he and all his knights. Such were his deeds and noble acts, in Arthur's court they shone, as like in all the world beside was hardly seen or known. For him King Arthur and his knights full 40 days did mourn, and in remembrance of his name that was so wondrous born. He built a tomb of marble grey, and year by year did come, to celebrate the tragic death and burial of Tom Thumb. His fame still lives in England here, among the country sort. Of him our wives and children small tell tales of pleasant sport.
If you enjoyed this story, please show your appreciation by giving it a thumbs up and sharing it with your friends. And don't forget to click the subscribe button to hear more stories.